This is the March 22nd, 2022 regular meeting of the Chatham County, Savannah Metropolitan Planning Commission. The board consists of Mr. Joseph Welch, Chairman, Ms. Karen Jarrett, Vice Chairman, Mr. Travis Coles, Secretary, Dr. Malik Watkins, Treasurer. Other board members include Ms. Lorraine Bowles, Ms. Elizabeth Epstein, Mr. Joseph Irvine, Mr. Wayne Noah, Mr. Jeff Nortisha, Mr. Cedric Coleman, Mr. Dwayne Stevens, Mr. Tom Wildwoody, Mr. Lee Smith, and Mr. Jay Melder. The MPC Executive Director is Melanie Wilson.
Good afternoon. We're going to start our meeting today here on March the 22nd, 2022, regular MPC meeting for Savannah, Chatham County Metropolitan Planning. I'll ask everybody to stand for the invocation and pledge allegiance following. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here today, that we as a commission representing our city and county make the right decisions for the betterment of the people of our city and county. And Lord, we ask you to watch over all our families. Thank you for our continued health, and for those who have lost loved ones in the past because of the pandemic and situations that we're dealing with in everyday life. We ask you to bless their souls. We ask you to please watch over the families of Ukraine who are losing their lives daily. And we ask you to bless the leaders of our nation and all of the armed services of our country, those who serve and protect us. In God's name we pray, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you for being here. We have a pretty good attendance here today, as well as for commissioners, as we have our commissioners online participating today. I'm going to read how it works here for MPC, those who may be here for the first time or hadn't been here for a while. The agenda is broken down into several parts. First, notices, proclamations, and acknowledgements. Next, the consent agenda, which consists of items for which the applicant is in agreement with the staff recommendation, and there are no known objections. This will be followed by regular business, old business, and adjournment. For each agenda item on regular business, the staff will make a presentation. The staff presentation will be followed by a presentation by the petitioner, should they elect to do so. The petitioner will be allotted a time frame of no more than 20 minutes. The board may then ask questions of the petitioner or staff for clarification. I'll do that every meeting after the petitioner makes his presentation, so we make that clear. Okay? Afterwards, the floor will be open for the public comment. If you wish to comment on the item that the board is considering at the time, I ask you to please use raise your hand feature for those who are at home on the computer. Raise your hand feature will be on your screen. Do not use the feature until the item you want to comment on is being considered. At the appropriate time, you will be recognized and staff will unmute your microphone. At the end of your allotted time, as determined by the chair, your microphone will be muted and the chair will recognize the next speaker. The total public comment time will be equivalent to the petitioner's presentation time. Therefore, it is important that you please use raise your hand feature on your computer during the hearing on that item if you want to speak on the petition. Once the floor is closed for public comment on a petition, no additional public speakers will be allowed. If you're not certain you want to speak, still use raise your hand feature on your computer and you'll have the option to decline when your name is called. After public comment, the petitioner will have the opportunity to come back forward for a rebuttal, and then additional needed questions by the board will be taken, and finally, the board will take action. Okay? So let's get started. First, I need an approval of the agenda. I need a motion.
Motion to approve, Smith.
Karen Jarrett seconds. We'll just do a verbal count. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Notices, notices, proclamations, and acknowledgements. April 12th, we'll have our next meeting here. Personnel committee will be a 10:30 a.m. meeting, and you can go to the webinar if you can't make it in person. Also on April 12th, we'll have a finance committee meeting at 11 a.m. You can also go to webinar if you can't make it, but I prefer you try to make it in person. April 12th, we will have a regular MPC meeting starting here at 1:30 p.m. in this room. All right. Items requested to be removed, and I'm just going to mention them all at one time to make it quicker, and we can vote on it verbally. Items requested to be removed from this final agenda: special use approval request 2110 West Gwinnett Street. Next is rezoning request 5659 Ageechee Road. Next is amended master plan for Veterans Parkway and Buckhalter Road. Next is zoning map amendment 500 John Carter Road, rezoned from light industrial to heavy industrial. Next item is rezoning map amendment 0 and 6703 Johnny Mercer Boulevard. That's rezoning 2 parcels from R2A TC, 2 family, which is residential limited to 2 to town center overlay, and plan development rezoning. And lastly is rezoning request 241 Broadwater Lane. If anybody is in our audience here today on these items, they will not take place today. And if you're on the computer at home on these items, they will not take place today. I need a vote, so we'll do a verbal. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against?
Mr. Chairman, we need a motion.
Sorry, I
make
need a
the
motion.
To remove the items as denoted.
Need a second?
This is Mr. Stevens. I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. Woodward, he beat you to it, but that's fine. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? Thank you. All right, so we'll go to consent agenda, approval of the March 1st, 2022 briefing regular meeting minutes. I need a motion.
Move to approve, Karen Jarrett.
Second, Smith.
Verbal vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? There's no old business for today. We'll go to regular business. And we're going to start off item 12, amended master plan 1025 West Gwinnett. And Mr. Lodson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item before the commission at this time is a request to amend the master plan at 1025 West Gwinnett Street. The property is a triangular shaped parcel bounded by Gwinnett on the north, the Springfield Canal on the west, and Interstate 16 on the south and east. There was a master plan that was approved in 2008, and this is a copy of that plan. The 2008 master plan was designed to recreate the historic development pattern and the open space network of the downtown historic district. This property, which as I mentioned on the south side of Gwinnett Street, is right across the street from what is now the in-market arena site, the City of Savannah's new arena. This plan included a series of proposed public streets, central open space, and planned intersecting vehicular connections across Gwinnett located here. There were 4 of those access points proposed across Gwinnett Street into the arena site, and a potential access across the canal to Stiles Avenue to the west, located right here. These connections today will not be possible based on the design of the Gwinnett Street improvements, which are currently under construction and are slated to be completed this summer. But at the time this plan was developed, the final design of the Gwinnett Street improvements were unknown, and therefore some assumptions had to be made about connectivity. And I'll show you in the next plan the proposed connections for the site as the current applicant is recommending or is requesting. In addition to this plan, there were development guidelines associated with it that include height and mass for buildings. It recommended buildings between 4 stories and 8 stories in height. Each of the areas in blue here are the developable areas. And as I zoom in a little, you can see the proposed build-to lines that were recommended for the various blocks to be street fronting buildings in those areas. As I mentioned, the maximum height that was recommended was 8 stories, and all the heights on this project were proposed to be defined by stories, not by feet. The principal concern that came out later related to the 2008 plan, which we're looking at here, were stormwater issues that came to awareness later in the process. As you can see, and as I noted, this property is still undeveloped. This is the subject property located here, and outside of a cell tower located on the property, it's completely vacant. The city is aware of a stormwater issue in this area. The Springfield Canal runs along the west side of the property here. There is a proposal for improvements in this canal to address these stormwater issues, but until that is done, any development of the subject property will need to address some of the stormwater concerns. This property is immediately east of a few streets that I want to point out here for later discussion. Springfield Street, Felder Street, Darwin Street, and Hearn Street. This is a residential area adjacent to the subject property, and we'll go into a little more detail about those streets here in just a second. This is the proposed master plan by the applicant, which are recommending that the property be developed in a 2-phased approach. The site that you see here in the northeast corner is a proposed multifamily development. They would, however, with this master plan, leave the remainder of the property undeveloped, and that would serve as stormwater detention, both for this site and the greater area in general. I did want to show you also that on this plan, the applicant is proposing additional right-of-way for the city for the widening of the canal. The belief is that once those improvements take place, that then this property becomes developable based on those improvements. But the interim development would require that this area be maintained for the purpose of controlling stormwater. The 2-phase approach of the current plan is to develop approximately 50% in that section, and for that remainder, as I mentioned, to remain open. The petitioner is proposing multifamily residential as the primary land use. The northernmost building will be developed to potentially accommodate a non-residential use as well. There are internal amenities and outdoor space are provided with this development, and phase 2 is proposed to be future development available upon completion of that canal. That future development would require that if this master plan is approved, that it be brought back to the Planning Commission as an amended master plan at that time. The subject site, as I mentioned, has frontage on Gwinnett Street. West Gwinnett is in the process, as I mentioned, of being improved, and it will include a 4-lane divided east-west travelway, new sidewalks and bike lanes, and a bridge over the Springfield Canal. Portions of the subject property were dedicated to accommodate the new right-of-way and the pedestrian mobility features. The city plans for the West Gwinnett improvements to be substantially complete in the summer of 2022, and public transportation will be available along Gwinnett Street. Per section 5.1010 of the zoning ordinance, the applicant will be required to provide a bus shelter with approval of the Chatham Area Transit when a development plan is submitted. In terms of this process, if this amended development plan is approved at the time in which the applicant is prepared to construct something, they will have to submit a general development plan, a specific development plan to the city of Savannah for review prior to construction. The proposed land use change is consistent with the planned development pattern for the Canal District area. These are the boundaries of the Canal District as identified by the city of Savannah. The subject property is highlighted here. The Canal District is proposed to be a mixed-use area designed to support the area around In-Market Arena, which is located roughly in this location. And it's designed to support it with residential density, commercial and hospitality uses as well. I wanted to go back to show you a few photographs. As I mentioned before, the streets and the residential that's immediately west of the subject property. This is Springfield Street, the view toward, and all these streets dead end at the canal. That's what the point I wanted to make. So this is the view from the dead end of Springfield Street across the canal toward the subject property. This is the view from Felder Street, which is located approximately here. This is the view from Darwin Street and from Hearn Street. All these are looking east toward the subject property. And you can see, I believe in this view, the cell tower in the distance there. We believe that the location of the subject property is conducive to supporting residential density. It does not immediately abut another use and will be accessed from a new 4-lane roadway. Phase 1 development is approximately 600 feet away from the nearest residential dwelling to the west across the Springfield Canal. And planning efforts in the vicinity of the subject property have prioritized densification, pedestrian connectivity, and a mix of uses. The proposed amendment appears to align with these goals and the larger goals of the Canal District, and we believe that the master plan could potentially catalyze additional development in the area. The opening of the arena and the further development of the Canal District master plan have provided a foundation for future development, and it's clear from staff's opinion that based on the stormwater improvements needed in the vicinity, the existing plan is less feasible than the proposed plan. So based on all those findings, we're recommending approval of the amended master plan. We are recommending a series of conditions, and I'll bring those up for you. Conditions are, as noted in the staff report, staff is recommending approval with conditions that the site plan for the subject property be consistent with the development standards of the RMF2 zoning district, that the permitted uses for the subject property be the same as those permitted in the RMF2 zoning district, that site plan shall include a secondary vehicular access point as approved by the City of Savannah traffic engineer, and that any site plan for the property be approved by the Metropolitan Planning Commission. I do want to go back just to identify one issue. We've mentioned the secondary access. There is an existing access point to the property that's used for maintenance road to the cell tower, which is located here. Our intention in recommending a secondary access, there is one that exists, but we do want to ensure through the review process that the City of Savannah is satisfied with that access point as an emergency access for the multifamily portion of this development in terms of the surface materials that are there. But with that, I'll open it up to any questions. The petitioner's representative is here, as well as the engineer on the project who can answer any technical questions.
I'm going to ask the petitioner this time to come forward,
Yes, sir.
and we'll ask you both questions if need be. Good afternoon, Mr. Yellen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Josh Yellen on behalf of the developer, Spandrel Development. We have with us both the developer and the project engineer, as Mr. Lotson mentioned, and they are also here to answer any and all questions that y'all have. We did want to thank staff for their recommendation of approval for this master plan amendment. We think this master plan amendment has been a long time coming, that this site was rezoned with the approved master plan that you saw in 2008. Prior to that, it was zoned business commercial for big box retail. Prior to that, it was approved for, I believe, 4 or 5 SCAD dormitories with a SCAD health facility. Obviously, as you can see, 15, 20 years later, this property remains vacant and it remains undeveloped, in part because some of the serious site conditions and, for lack of a better word, serious warts that this property has. There's a stormwater issue. There's a Springfield Canal issue, and there's also some environmental issues that are plaguing the site. And so we think that with the plan that we're proposing, we finally have a solution to this site that is actually feasible. And at every step of the way, we've been excited about the prospect of developing the site, but also making sure that we've met with city staff and met with MPC staff to discuss how we can get this project off the ground, because we know that one of the largest impediments to development in the past has been the Springfield Canal in terms of what capacity it has in terms of stormwater. And we do understand that our participation and our willingness to work with the city in terms of canal expansion not only benefits this property, but benefits the community at large, which is experiencing some flooding issues. And so we've had these conversations with the city. And as you can see on the plan that we are showing, we are specifically trying to keep our development as far away from the Springfield Canal as possible. We want to be able to develop this phase while also working with the city on improving the Springfield Canal, so that in the future, once the conveyance reaches, and I'm not an engineer, so these terms are not good with me, but once the conveyance reaches the appropriate levels to develop the adjacent parcel, we would come back before this board for approval if and when a phase 2 is feasible. And we do believe that this project now is feasible, particularly as compared to the previous plans, because so much has changed in the area. In 2008, when this master plan was approved, they are showing connectivity all throughout the Canal District. They are showing these streets as being dedicated City of Savannah right-of-ways. They are showing development immediately adjacent to the Springfield Canal. None of this is feasible anymore. None of this makes sense from a development standpoint and from the standpoint of protecting and enhancing the Canal District. And so what we have before you today is the new proposal for the multifamily development. We do thank staff for the recommendation of approval, and we can and do agree with all of the recommendations of staff. But I do have to mention one point that there's a disagreement on that I need to bring up to the board, that under the development standards of the RMF2, the maximum height permitted is 4 stories and 50 feet. Frankly, because of the problems associated with this property, because of the environmental concerns, because of the stormwater issues, the only way that this project is developable is through a 5th story on the buildings. We believe that we know that we're over 600 feet away from the nearest residential. We are an isolated, unique property that truly does not have any neighbors at this point. We don't believe that 5th story will inconvenience anyone. There's no one going to be looking down into people's windows. But that is one of those major issues, that the 5th story is necessary for the development. And we believe it's particularly approvable by this board, as the current master plan approves 8 stories. If we were to build today, we could do 8 stories, 4 to 8 stories by right. What we were asking for is to limit the development to 5 stories, along with the rest of the RMF2 development standards. And so with that, we do respectfully request that you approve of the staff recommendation for the master plan amendment, with the condition that we be allowed to develop up to a maximum height of 5 stories. And we are happy to answer any questions that y'all might have regarding the project and any engineering aspects associated with it as well. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. The developer want to say anything? Nope, okay. I'm opening up for questions. Ms. Jarrett?
I wanted to ask about the drainage issues and the flooding issues. Is this in a floodplain?
John Giordano, Thomas and Hutton. Yes, ma'am, it is in a floodplain. It's in a FEMA floodplain. And the city of Savannah has also identified this as a special flood hazard area based on the Springfield Canal conveyance issues.
Is the entire property in the floodplain?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, so you're going to have to fill in order to build this.
So yes, we will have to provide fill for the portion that is to be developed, which,
Are you going to cut an equivalent amount?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's why we're maintaining the west side of the property for our basically a large excavation area. That's where we'll get our floodplain mitigation.
Okay, and if we went to 5 stories, is that all that you're going to build? Would that work for your development?
You mean from allowing us to get the required number of units? Yes, if we were allowed the five stories, that would allow us to get what we needed for this first phase of development. As Josh and Marcus mentioned, the goal is that the property would be developed in 2 phases. So we understand that the city of Savannah is currently in the process of designing improvements to the Springfield Canal to provide a 100-year conveyance. Once that is completed, and they would require a right of way from this property. That's what this dashed line is over on the west side of the property. That's anticipated right of way to be donated to the city. Once 100-year conveyance is provided, then the second phase of the project would move forward, at which point the pond area would be backfilled. We would no longer be within a floodplain. Once 100-year conveyance is provided, that could be removed from the flood zone, and then we would be allowed to fully develop the remaining portions.
Thomas and Hutton doing the study for the Springfield Canal as well.
I believe so. I'm not in the stormwater department. I know we were working on that at some point. I'm not sure if we are currently working on the Springfield Canal model at this point.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Melter?
Would you talk about any plans or availability the developer has for providing affordable housing in this development with the support of 5 stories?
And thank you for the question, Mr. City Manager. We have started those conversations with people with the city of Savannah. We have started this process, and I think I am allowed to disclose to everyone on this board. Despite the affordable housing issue not necessarily being a purview of the MPC as it relates to the master plan amendment, we have 100% started discussions with the city in terms of incorporating affordable housing into this development through a development agreement. We had not discussed the 5th story as being related to that. We had discussed looking at some of the other inclusionary zoning mechanisms utilized in Atlanta and Decatur in terms of the city of Savannah providing incentives in terms of a trade-off for providing affordable housing on this site. We had made the commitment to city development services that we are fully engaged and going to work through that process with the city of Savannah and have those meetings after the approval, but they were not related to the 5th story per se.
Thank you, Mr.
Yep, thank you.
Bowles?
We have had some mentioning of the secondary access site. Can someone show me where that is on the map?
Sure. The secondary access would be located right here on the east corner of the site. So we reached out to the city of Savannah, and we were able to get the current Gwinnett Street widening plan. So the actual line work that you see here for Gwinnett Street is currently what's under construction. So we were able to line up our main entrance with where the full access median break is being provided by the city. And then we would have our secondary access basically, like I had mentioned, as far over on the east as possible. That would have to be paved in order to comply with City of Savannah fire requirements.
And there was discussion about nearby residents? I didn't see any, and I think you answered that question when you came up. So had there been any opposition? Was there anything that needs to be addressed regarding notification to anybody nearby?
No, ma'am. All parties were notified in compliance with state law, and we have not received any opposition to date.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowles, excuse me, sorry, Mr. Yellen, this is Mr. Stevens. To that point, could you please, just for the record, state what those methods were as far as the notification for the community?
And sorry, so the notification is provided by the MPC, and so Mr. Lotson's gonna step up.
Okay.
Mr. Stevens and members of the board, so consistent with the notification procedures of the zoning ordinance, we send individual letters to all property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. We did that. We did not have any responses, either support or opposition for this particular case, which is sometimes the case with master plans. We do see much more interest in participation when it comes to zoning petitions, but since this is not a zoning change, but an amendment to a master plan, that's probably part of the reason as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. I asked because that is I know that area is of extreme concern in regards to flooding. So I know that I find it hard to believe. Well, I won't say I find it hard to believe. I find it difficult for that community to not have had any input in regards to that. But I understand that the process in which the community outreach was done is legal, and in that regard, I will settle there. However, I have a question for Mr. Giordano as well. Considering the amount of flooding that community has been subjected to for decades, what's the retention pond that is going to be placed in the first phase? Is that at the minimum capacity for said development, or would you guys potentially allow for a little bit more than the minimum for the retention until they get up to the 100-year conveyance and then go into the next phase of this project?
Sure. So the pond that is currently shown, and please keep in mind, this plan is conceptual. As we progress through this process, this is just for the master plan amendment. We'll come back before the planning commission with the general development plan. And at that point, we will have a much more defined site plan outlining how we meet all the RMF2 requirements. We'll have dug a little bit further into the stormwater, but based on the preliminary calculations that we've done, we have adequate excavation area here for the floodplain mitigation. Now, keep in mind that it's separate from the stormwater. So for any of the normal stormwater events that we have, the pond volume that is being provided is well above any of the requirements that are needed. So in addition to providing the floodplain mitigation, we are able to meet our pre versus post runoff far and above. And doing the preliminary calculations we have based on this current plan, there is excess capacity here.
There will be ability for backflow. Just wanted to ask about the drainage.
So in lay terms, is this in the event that anybody is in attendance at the facility that is from the community or on the call that is from the community? So in lay terms, the current pond and the capacity in which it can hold should be able to aid instead of presenting a further stormwater or stormwater issue, correct?
That's correct. There should be no additional impacts to the surrounding community based on this development. We're actually providing additional storage we're providing the hydraulic connectivity so that the water can backflow back and forth in between.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Melder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the requested 5th story, what would be the proposed height?
We were discussing before, 65 feet, max 65.
Max 65.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wildwood?
This may be for staff and the developers. So the current site plan approves 8 stories in the smaller area, 6 stories, and then 4 stories. And you're requesting it to be zoned RMF2. Is it the RMF2 zoning that prevents it from going to 5?
The RMF2 zoning has a maximum permitted height of 50 feet. It's not measured in stories, but it is measured in feet. So within that, a 5-story building, unless it has a flat roof, is not possible. So I think that's why the applicant is requesting the additional.
Okay, so the applicant, you're okay with all the other staff recommendations. You just want to add the one additional caveat that 5th story be up to a maximum of 65 feet.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Jarrett, state your name, please.
Karen Jarrett, to that point, why are we asking for the reduced height? I mean, they have an approved plan before us, correct?
Yeah, the approved plan does permit in a section of the property up to 8 stories.
And up
Here,
to 6 all the way to the canal.
and let me zoom in for those who. So the numbers you see here are the approved heights for what were proposed with these proposed blocks. So 8 feet to the far east, 6, 6, 6 across the front here, and then 4 stories as you go south. When the petitioner submitted their their master plan, they did not include the types of development standards that we would use for review when they submit a general development plan. That's why we recommended that it be reviewed based on the multifamily zoning designation that is closest to in the city of Savannah, which is the RMF2. Within that district, the maximum height is 50 feet. We did not make a recommendation that additional height over what's permitted in the RMF2 district be allowed. But we did understand that the applicant was going to pursue that with the board today. So
Those development standards as much as the height or more maybe than the height.
yes, we were just trying to put everything within the RMF2 bucket, so to speak, so that when it was time to review this, we would review it based on those standards.
Mr. Melder?
Mr. Watson, do you mind zooming in on the height and mass portion of the master plan?
Sure.
Do we think that we could carry over some of this language specifically as it relates to the building facade being broken down vertically to reduce their mass and create a human scale into the conditions of this approval with the 5th floor?
Well, I think the commission certainly that's within their purview to do that. Yes, sir.
That will be my recommendation to my colleagues.
Mr. Melder, could you restate that, please, just for the record, just so it's clear?
That we carry over language here in the original master plan from 2008 from the height and mass section, that building facades over 60 feet in width should be broken down vertically to reduce their mass and create a human scale. Horizontal articulation of buildings should include an identifiable base, middle, and top.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Any further questions? Anybody on the computer? That's the commissioner. Have any questions for staff? Petitioner?
Just want to clarify something. This is Mr. Stevens, Mr. Lotson. So if I'm understanding this correctly, they're requesting an additional story to get them to 5 feet, or are you saying they're reducing it? And I know they are trying to get up to 60, they'll be at 65 feet in this instance, and currently it's 50 feet. I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, let me just be clear. The current master plan allows varying heights based on the location of the site, on the location within the site between 4 stories and up to 8 stories. If this plan is amended, then essentially this plan goes away and it's replaced by the applicant's proposed plan, which you see here. What we were recommending is that in this phase 1 or within this master plan, that the RMF2 development standards apply to this property. With that application, that would mean that the maximum permitted height would be 50 feet because that's what's allowed in RMF2. However, should the commission move to allow greater height, we can certainly do that, and that will be added as a additional standard on this plan, and as well as the language that Mr. Melder just mentioned, if that is what gets approved today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And one last thing, and it should do it for me. Do you have available the uses of the RMF zoning?
Yes, I can share that with you. It is multifamily residential, but we'll bring that up as well.
Okay.
Cedric Coleman. I have a question of staff relative to the RF zoning that's proposed. Does it not offer any opportunities for bonus floors by any of the pathways that usually are offered for such?
No, sir, there are no height incentives, if you will, within the RMF2 district. It is just a maximum height of 50 feet and it's capped at that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, Liz Epstein. The original plan 14 years ago showed connectivity and the traditional Savannah type grid connecting to that property across Gwinnett Street. I understand that it's still, there's no plans in the works for development there.
Across Gwinnett?
Yeah, north, yeah.
I believe actually we're looking at what will be surface parking for the arena site.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, that answers that. I was just, when I look at this plan, I see a very suburban, typical apartment building kind of complex that is, to me, pretty far from the original intent, which is to maintain some semblance of the Savannah grid system. I didn't know if it could possibly be mitigated by not having parking, say, along the front at the frontage on Gwinnett Street. I see that the right-of-way has been widened to the point where that might not be, it might not make much of an impact to pull that building forward, but just some reference to what would be a more typical Savannah fabric.
And yes, ma'am, Ms. Epstein. And we tried to carry over as much as possible from that plan, understanding that the grid pattern with the public dedication of streets and the connectivity, not feasible. But we tried to preserve the aspects that would actually fit in with making a feasible development. And so as you can see at the top, we have included a few pocket parks across the development. This pocket park at the front, I'll try and highlight it over here. We have had conversations with the city of Savannah as well, knowing that the Canal District is trying to have a more art-friendly feel than the rest of the city. We've had conversations with the city already about putting some public art installations in that park. We also intend to line the entryway with live oaks. And so we are trying to preserve some of those aspects that we see in the downtown area, but understanding that this site is severely limited by what we can do.
Is there any opportunity in that right of way in the short term?
But I will let John.
I just wanted to add one other thing. So I think something else to keep in mind when looking at this, the original plan had Gwinnett Street being basically at grade. If you look back at the approved master plan, this was a box culvert coming through here. And currently the city of Savannah is building a bridge over Gwinnett Street. So why, when you look at this and you see this large right-of-way acquisition across the front, that was basically for tie slopes. And so this area right here, I mean, this is all 3-to-1 side slopes. This is very steep tying down. The city of Savannah also is, they've got a maintenance access road that runs through this area. You know, all of that was kind of taken into consideration when laying out this revised master plan. If we were to push the buildings up, they were going to be backed right up next to a slope coming down off a tie slope. There was going to be a maintenance road right there. So we felt like this was a good plan to offset the building and give a little bit of room between just, you know, ground story units looking into a hill. You know, when looking at the city's plan for Gwinnett Street, you know, with the grade change coming up and over Gwinnett Street, that's what eventually made all these connection points coming across infeasible. It just wasn't possible with the grades.
So what would, if you're driving, which way, west on Gwinnett Street, what would you see of this development if it were laid out the way it was?
So as you're coming up here, you're going to be looking over and you'll be, you know,
Like level with the second story or something?
probably would be my guesstimation at this point. I don't have the grades on Gwinnett Street, nor do we have the.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Any commissioners on computer? This time I'll open it to the public. Is there anybody here in the audience wish to come forward to speak on this project? Nope. Anybody on the computer? Please raise your hand feature and you'll be recognized.
Mr. Chair, Brenda Stevens.
Ms. Brenda Stevens, if you would state your name for the record, you have 3 minutes. Please unmute your. Okay.
I'm unmuted. I didn't raise my hand. I don't know what happened. I did not raise my hand, so just disregard it.
Okay. Anybody else? There's nobody else. Okay, then Mr. Woodwarding.
I have a question for Neville. Tom Wywoody with, would a height limit of 60 make this unfeasible?
Hi, how are you? Emmanuel Newman, Spandrel Development Partners. It's a question of slope. So, and I would assume you guys want us to have a grander first floor, which means like 14 to 15 feet of height. Then we're going to need 11 feet on each floor. So, and then the question is, are we having a flat roof or a sloped roof? 65 feet, we feel, gives us that flexibility in order to get an architecture that you want, especially if you want it to be broken down with different levels of verticality. So I think that it's just a safer band. Hope that answers the question. Oh, I thought I did. Sorry, Emmanuel Newman, Spandrel Development Partners.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Melder. I was going to.
I'd like to make a motion for the commission to approve the petitioner's request with all the staff's recommendations, plus allowing the developer to include a fifth floor up to 65 feet and to also pull over the language on height and step down from the original 2008 master plan as written.
Second, Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Melder, and thank you, Mr. Smith. We'll go to a vote.
May I offer up a potential amendment to said motion? And that is to where the 65 feet are, where the 65 height is permitted. That is the furthest point. That rests at the furthest points away from the closest abutting edge of the development to the residences.
This is Shedrick Coleman.
Yes, sir.
I think, Mr. Stevens, that's going to be hard architecturally to pull off on a building, looking at the shape that they're talking about. So you're basically saying that you want the height away from the residences, which is basically to the east, to be the taller section as opposed to that to the west.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
I would say this is Jay Melder. From my point of view, there's a retention pond to the west, there's an interstate to the east and provides enough buffer there that I don't know that I agree with the sentiment, but I wouldn't want to risk any architectural integrity. I think there's enough buffer around the site.
I agree with that.
Fair enough.
So do you
So
want to?
with that, I withdraw. With that, I withdraw the amendment.
We'll stick with the original motion that's on the floor and seconded by Mr. Smith. We'll go to a vote. Ms. Lorraine Bowles,
Yes.
Mr. Shredrick Coleman,
Jedrick Coleman, yes.
Travis Coles, not here. Mrs. Epstein,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph Irvin,
Yes.
Ms. Karen Jarrett,
Yes.
Mr. Jay Melder,
Yes.
Mr. Wayne Noah, not here. Mr. Jeff Notrika,
Yes.
Mr. Lee Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Stevens,
Yes.
Dr. Watkins,
Yes.
and Mr. Woodwardie,
Yes.
and Joseph Welch, yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Yellen. Y'all have a good afternoon. We go to item number 13, which is rezoning request, 7411 Skidaway Road.
And Mr. Chairman, it's Malik Watkins, just to remind everyone, I'm recused off of this one.
That's correct. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so this is a proposed rezoning to a property, or a set of properties rather, on Skidaway Road. It's close to the larger intersection here with Ferguson and Skidaway right here. This smaller road right here is Ridgewood Road. Zoom in a little bit here. So just to get your bearings a little bit, this is a commercial area over here. This is the Jalapenos Mexican restaurant, and then this is the Driftaway Cafe across the street here. These are the 4 subject properties that are proposed to be rezoned. They are currently R1 for a single family residential, and they're proposed to be moved over to BN for a neighborhood business. So a few pictures of the property we went out there and took. You can see that this is the Driftaway Cafe across the street right there. The property is currently undeveloped, but it is being used just sort of by default as a overflow parking for the surrounding commercial centers. You can see there are 2 large live oak trees here as well on this property. Here's Melissa for scale. We took a few pictures of the lot, but as I said, it's unpaved, undeveloped, but just kind of been used this way for, I'm told, about 10 years. So as I said, they would like for this to be rezoned from R1 single family. As the property is currently, looking at the state of the property and as it is currently zoned, we don't feel that the R1 zoning really works for this property anymore, as it's been used for the last 10 years. I would like to point out the surrounding properties here. There is a residence right here to the south of these properties. There is also a residence across the street here, across Ridgewood Road. We spoke to both of these property owners, and with the we have a buffer in our recommendation, a vegetative buffer of 30 feet on those sides, the east and south sides, and the property owners seem to be okay with the idea of working in with the buffers there. So the BN zoning is, as I said, for neighborhood business. From the ordinance, the purpose of this district shall be to provide convenient shopping facilities consisting of convenience goods and personal services in neighborhood market areas. So we see this as a good fit for that. There is, as I said, a lot of commercial around here. There's just up the road here, of course, is on Skidaway. There is a good amount of commercial at this center right there. So this is sort of the transitional point from where Skidaway starts to turn from commercial to residential. So we feel it still fits with the pattern of development for it to be moved over to neighborhood business. As I said, we did get a concept map from the developer. Let me see if I can spin this around. This is of course not binding, but just an idea for the concept. This would be Skidaway Road down here at the bottom. This would be Ridgewood over here. So we're recommending, of course, as I said, a 30-foot buffer along the way on the south and east sides of it. And I would like to make clear that right now, there's not really any trees here. There's just kind of green space. We are recommending that they put a planted buffer in there to create an actual screening against the residential properties. So where's my staff report? So just to sum that up, Skidaway Road is of course pretty heavily trafficked commercial corridor, begins to transition to residential just east of the subject property. It's been used as overflow parking by nearby restaurants for years and would likely continue to be used that way, just with proper paving, parking, and of course access. And we are also wanting to recommend that the access points, as described in the concept plan, only lead out onto Skidaway Road rather than coming out onto Ridgewood, because that's it's a pretty small road and it's a very residential kind of road. It's not something that commercial traffic should be coming in and out on. So the proposed zoning would allow neighborhood scale retail and services which are similar in nature to the existing commercial uses in the vicinity. And then this, in the addition to the fact that the residential development is unlikely at this location, lends justification to the requested rezoning. So we are recommending approval, but again, with the following two conditions. First, that a 30-foot vegetative buffer be placed on the southern and eastern property lines with a degree of opacity which will obscure the site from the right-of-way and adjacent residential property as determined by the county arborist. The county arborist shall also approve the removal of any of the existing trees on site, which includes the two large oak trees that I showed you earlier. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from commissioners here? How about on the computer? Is the petitioner here?
Yes, sir.
You want to come forward and
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Brannon. I'm an attorney with Bowen Fallick, and I represent Sheffield and Shore. And I'm here really just to answer any questions you have. We think this will be a big improvement on what's been there it's been a parking lot, I think, for about 25 years. And I think this will be an improvement for that.
there will eventually be a building, I'm sure,
Possibly, yes.
in that space.
Yeah.
Any questions for this gentleman? Any commissioner on computer? Is there anybody in the audience wishes to come speak, ask a question? How about on the computer? Please raise your hand feature on the computer if you have a question for the petitioner or staff.
Mr. Chairman, Jessica Perry.
Ms. Perry, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Jessica Perry. I am the county arborist for Chatham County. I did notice that my name was on their proposal, and I did want to make a statement that whenever I do review the plan, I would like to have those 2 trees that was pictured saved. So that will be my recommendation when I do review the plan.
That's the 2 oak trees, ma'am?
Yes, sir. The 2 live oaks.
That's a fixture for Isle of Hope, I know.
Yes. So
I
that would definitely.
agree with you, but that's I'm in
Yes.
agreement with you there.
Yeah, so that definitely will alter their plans.
What do you think
Yeah,
of that,
we
sir?
agree with that. That's fine.
You agree with that?
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Say that again in the microphone for the record?
Yes, sir. We agree with that.
There you go.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for petitioner or staff? Mr. Melder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back into something you asked earlier, is part of the condition to make sure the petitioner makes sure that that verify no grave sites are on the property prior to construction? I know that there's a grave site across the street, I believe.
Yes, sir. We can certainly check on that. I don't think I think you can see everything there. I mean, we would be able to see it, but
If you're going further back onto that site, you're not? Okay.
And Mr. Melder and members of the commission, should the property be, a site plan be submitted for development of the property, once they go to, there is no existing headstones on the property. I've visited the site several times. However, should something be found on site, then they would have to go through the normal procedures through the state of Georgia to address that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. You developer?
Yeah, Jim Sheffield.
You come to the microphone, Jim. Just state your name for the record.
Yeah, Jim Sheffield, managing partner for Sheffield and Shore. Actually, talking about headstones, across the street, you'll see the small strip of land that's next to Driftaway Cafe. I purchased that years ago, and there was headstones, and I actually gifted that to the old cemeteries. They wanted to make it complete. I actually purchased the surveyed it so they could get they're going to put a fence around it eventually. So I've been in the community for 32 years.
Yep.
So I wouldn't cut the trees if I'd leave them before I did anything. So.
Thank you very much,
Make
Mr.
a good night.
Sheffield.
Thank you.
Okay, well, any more discussion? I look for a motion.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Smith, second.
Ms. Maureen Bowles,
Yes.
Mr. Cedric Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Elizabeth Epstein,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph Irvin,
Yes.
Ms. Karen Jarrett,
Yes.
Mr. Jay Melder,
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Notrica,
Yes.
Mr. Lee Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Stevens,
Yes.
Dr. Watkins.
Recused.
I'm sorry. Thank you. You're right. Mr. Woodward
Yes.
and Mr. Welch, yes. Motion passes. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Welch, just for clarification for staff, is this including the saving of the 2 trees referenced
Yes,
as part
that's
of the
true. Yes.
condition? I just want to make sure that everybody that voted, that you meant to have that included in your recommendation.
Correct. County Arbor said that's what she would do. So yes. She's got to approve it.
Okay, so we
That's-
need to make sure that we include that as part of the condition of approval. So we'll make sure that we have that included.
Okay.
Do you want to get consensus of the board to have that?
Yes,
added,
to
just
have
so that we're
consensus
correct?
of the board that the 2 oak trees that the arborist for Chatham County referred to
Yes.
will be included in this motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr.
I
Smith.
prefer we say recommendation of the county arborist.
Yes, sir.
Things could be if you had a diseased tree. If you
That's
had
true too.
I just don't want to hold us to or the developer to something that may not be possible.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, the language for our staff report, I believe said the same thing with the, per the recommendation of the county arborist. Let me see here.
It's in there. Yeah.
Yes, as determined by the county arborist. Shall be, yeah.
It's included. Thank y'all. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, guys. Mr. Sheffield, have a good
Thank you,
day, sir.
Commissioners.
Thanks for being here. Next is item 14, General Development Plan, Wicklow Street, Carey Street, and Dixie Avenue. Mr. Lotson, take it away.
Thank you, sir. So what we have here is a general development plan that's been submitted by the applicant of Vinton Companies. The petitioner is bringing this forward as a result of a condition associated with the rezoning that was done in December of 2021. The city of Savannah rezoned this property from community business and single family residential to the multifamily residential zoning classification. As a condition of that approval, they require that the development plan be brought back to the Metropolitan Planning Commission. So this tax map shows the subject properties as they currently exist. Under development, these properties will have to be combined into a single property, or two properties in this case, the north side of Carey Street and the south side of Carey Street. Among the other conditions that were associated with the adoption of the rezoning included eliminating vehicular or pedestrian access to Dixie Avenue. Also included the provision of a 10-foot multi-use path on the south side of Carey Street, a vegetative buffer and privacy fence between the site and residential properties on Dixie Avenue, as well as pedestrian connectivity out to B Road, which is just east of the west of the subject property here. Staff did review the submitted general development plan. Section 3.8.4 of the zoning ordinance outlines the review procedures for GDPs. General development plans are intended to, and this is a quote from the ordinance, identify the overall concept of a proposed development. Information required on such plan is intended to convey the character and layout of the project and to identify issues that must be addressed on the specific development plan phase. And then it lists the requirements for general development plans, which is essentially a checklist. Just for the public and understanding the process, general development plans are often submitted by applicants before they go into frankly, the time and expense that it takes to produce a specific development plan so that they can get initial feedback from review departments in the city and or county, as well as MPC staff. In other words, they're looking for anything that might cause it to not be feasible before they go into the full scale drawings. A general approval of a general development plan does not permit an applicant to pull any permits, garner any approval that would allow construction. They will still have to submit a specific development plan, which include the engineered drawings, the construction drawings that will go to ground, so to speak. In review of the conditions associated with the adoption of the rezoning, the applicant has provided those conditions on the general development plan, and they are also in compliance with the requirements of section 3.8.4 of that development plan. Based on those findings, we are recommending approval. I do want to go into the proposed development just a little bit to remind those who may not have been intimately involved in the rezoning process. The proposed development consists of 4 residential buildings that you see here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It also includes surface parking, garage parking, amenities, and detention, all on 2 sites, essentially, the north and south sides of Carey Street. The site is designed to accommodate 280 dwelling units across those buildings, a total of 427 parking spaces, which includes 24 garage spaces, which is becoming more common within multifamily developments. The northern portion of the site is accessed via Wicklow Street. In this area here. Wicklow Street is an improved City of Savannah street with a 40-foot right-of-way. The southern portion of the site will be accessed via Johnson Street, which is located right here. Johnson Street is currently an unopened right-of-way, but it is proposed to be opened and improved to City of Savannah standards by the developer. The location of these access points were determined in consultation with the City of Savannah traffic engineer. Based on staff's review, the proposed general development plan does meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The proposed plan also meets the additional requirements that were conditions of the 2021 rezoning adoption by the mayor and aldermen. And based on the plan provided and consideration of the review process, staff is recommending approval. We did add one condition, a note really, that the specific development plan approval will be contingent on conformance with all the standards that are required in that section, as well as the abandonment and or quit claim of the Munster Street right-of-way, which bisects the subject property. Based on the general development plan, that would have to be addressed prior to any construction on site. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is the petitioner here?
Yes, sir.
If you'd like to come forward at this time. You have 20 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon. Travis Burke with Coleman Company, representing the petitioner. Marcus did a great job outlining the project. Really don't have a whole lot to add to that other than, there were 5 conditions placed on this by council, which we've addressed. One of them being, presenting the planning commission, which brought us here today. We've removed any access that we were currently showing from the project to Dixie Avenue. We are providing the 10-foot wide multi-use path on the south side of Cary. This path will connect to the Police Memorial Trail and provide that connection back to B Road and to Daffin Park. So that kind of provides a very crucial link for that community resource. Excuse me. We're providing the vegetated buffer and fencing for the properties that are adjacent to us along the Dixie Avenue. And the pedestrian connectivity to B Road, we're currently working with the Salvation Army on securing the necessary easements in order to construct that access. Cary Road, our street, I should say, is only a 32.5-foot right-of-way, which is kind of odd. So there's not a lot of public right-of-way space there to fit in this proposed sidewalk. So we've met with Salvation Army a couple of times. They're excited about being able to be a part of this. They see it as a benefit to the community, and they see it also for them as an opportunity to bring in community to their center. They've just recently renovated their gymnasium floor. They're planning, outside recreation and activities that they're hoping that this will help bring the community together in that aspect. So we've gotten great reception for them. We're just working through the details of how that would be implemented and to get that easement secured. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, sir. All right, any questions for petitioner or staff from commissioners here? Ms. Jarrett?
How big are those parking spaces? They look so small.
They are the standard spaces right out of the city ordinance. This is a 60 scale, so they do look kind of tiny. I think the new standard is 9 foot by 17.5 with a 26-foot wide drive aisle. So from interlock to interlock, it's still 64 feet. It's just the way they're striped now are differently based on the current ordinance, but they all meet the minimum standard.
Is there a reason that we've renamed Wicklow Street to Johnson Street in that area that we're adding right of way?
For whatever reason, Ms. Jarrett, that is currently named Johnson Street unopened right away. We can continue Wicklow. I'm sure 911 addressing would appreciate that if we did, but we're just going by what's currently on the tax maps.
Any other questions? Yes,
Liz Epstein, I have one. What size units, how many bedrooms are you being considered, or what's represented here? I know it's preliminary.
Yes, ma'am. So there are going to be a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. I don't have the exact matrix. They're working through the final architectural drawings now, but it will be a blend of those 3 unit types.
Does that help you?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioner on the computer? No? Is there anybody in the audience from the public wishes to come up and ask a question? Speak your mind? No? Anybody on the computer? Raise your hand feature. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm sorry, Ms. Bowles. Yes.
Is there an opportunity for affordable housing?
For what?
Affordable housing.
I really can't speak to the pricing. I'm just an engineer on the project. I know these are going to be Class A apartments is what they're presenting them as. I have no idea what the rents or anything like that are going to be.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. Mr. Yellen? Can't go today without seeing you in the audience, not hearing from you, my friend. Okay. State your name for the record.
I'm sorry, Harold Yellen for petitioner. Josh's dad, I guess. In the zoning petition itself, this property is very different, the front parcel and the back parcel. The back parcel is the site of a former dump, and we're going to be spending roughly $2 million to $2.5 million cleaning up the dump site. So we know that everybody has to make a contribution, and we're going to be contributing over $2 million to remediate that dump site. Also, it was sort of casually mentioned, but that sidewalk, the pedestrian connectivity to B Road is really important. And I think that caught the attention of City Council. It's really going to be connecting Grayson Stadium with the bike path, not just B Road. It's going to be exceptional. So people from Parkside and people from Ardsley Park literally will be able to get on their bikes with kids and travel. So we are doing a lot of things. Affordable housing, at least at this stage, is not part of the program, but we are making enormous community benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yellen. Any further questions? Any discussion? I'll look for a motion.
Tom Iwoody, motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Second. Who wishes the second?
Second, Karen Jarrett.
Thank you. We'll go to a vote. Ms. Laureen Bowles,
Yes.
Mr. Cedric Coleman,
Yeah.
Ms. Elizabeth Epstein,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph Irvin,
Yes.
Karen Jarrett,
Yes.
Mr. Jay Melder,
Yes.
Mr. Jeff Notrica,
Yes.
Mr. Lee Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Stevens,
Yes.
Dr. Watkins,
Yes.
Mr. Woodward,
Yes.
and Mr. Welch, myself, yes, motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. There's no presentations, but I do have little other business. I just want this commission to recognize that Mr. Mark Wilkes, who's been with us 25 years and is our transportation planner, MPO and MPC, has announced his retirement. I'll ask you to please take the time to recognize him and thank him for his hard work and efforts that he put forth for this commission for so many years. And his work never went unnoticed. Losing a good man, and I wish him the best in his future endeavors. And if you take a moment, send him an email or give him a handshake and thank him. Ms. Wilson, I know there's an event.
I was just going to say, yes, thank you for recognizing Mark and his work and contributions to the MPC, the MPO, and to Chatham and Savannah regarding transportation planning and other efforts. We're having a celebration because he's really excited to do some other things on March the 29th from 4:30 to 6:30 here. And if you are coming, please just let us know. So thank you for recognizing him.
Yes, ma'am.
And we wish him luck as well on his new endeavors.
I want to thank staff for their work on the agendas today. We appreciate your hard work and your effort. And again, I'm going to ask everybody for our April 12th meeting. You don't have to attend the pre-meeting. You can do that from home or your office on the computer, but I ask you to please start attending the regular meeting if you don't mind. County and city are full-fledged on board with their meetings, and I'd like for us to all be in attendance now. And we'll start meeting in the conference room as well. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great week, and everybody be healthy and take care.